Can undervolting your CPU and GPU help reduce your electricity usage and money hemorrhaging from your bank account to the energy company's bank account? Let's give it a go. Roll the intro. I recently had the idea of undervolting my computer hardware to save $1 or $2 on my electric bill. I'm still working on the math to see how much I can save, and I suck at math. However, I was able to lower the voltage on both my 5900X CPU and my RTX 3080 GPU while maintaining performance. And in the case of the GPU, I actually increased performance while lowering the voltage. Let's look at how I undervolted each one right after this word from our sponsor. They say older gamers have slower reflexes.
I thought he would be weaker. He wasn't.
They always blame the controller as an unfair advantage.
I got Gulag, I'm coming back for you, bitch!
I've got 5 decades of gaming experience. Too old to game my ass. You know what I'm talking about. For undervolting my CPU, I looked at a lot of YouTube videos and pretty much all of them had the changing settings in the BIOS and then booting up the computer, then running Cinebench, then shutting down the computer, going back into BIOS and changing things that way. Since I had the ROG Strix X570E gaming board, that utilizes the AI Suite 3, and I was able to do my undervolting in the AI Suite 3. So for this, we require Cinebench. I just downloaded Cinebench R23 from Windows Store, and then the AI program you can get from Republic of Gamers. So my baseline was the CPU would get up to 70 degrees Celsius. The voltage was 1.288 volts. And then the Cinebench score was 21973. Within the AI3 suite, we go to the TPU settings, and that's where we're going to be able to adjust the frequency and the CPU voltage. So initially, for the first test, I dropped the frequency all the way down to 4000, because that's what I had seen in one of the YouTube videos. And then for the voltage, I just dropped down to 1.2. I didn't want to go too far right away, so I figured 1.2 was a safe place to start. That first undervolting test did drop our wattage down from 178 to 141. Our temperature dropped from 70 down to 59, and the voltage went from about 1288 to 1194. It also dropped our Cinebench score down about 2,500 points, so we didn't want to go that far. I then conducted 2 more tests. The next one, I increased the megahertz up to 4200, and I dropped the voltage down to 1.1. That increased our wattage, but it also increased our overall score back up to 20,230. I did one more test at 4200 megahertz, but this time I dropped the voltage down to 1, and this seemed to be the sweet spot. Our wattage dropped down to 130 watts. The temperature, max temp was 57 degrees, and then the score was 20,275. So we only dropped about 1,500 in the overall score, which to me was acceptable. Never really noticed it in any of the gaming or anything after that. The RTX 3080 in my system is from a Dell Alienware computer. At the time, the only way you could get a 3000 series card was to buy it in a pre-built or buy it from a scalper at twice the price. The design is similar to the Founders card with a 2-fan configuration. It tends to run hotter than my RTX 3070, which is an ROG Strix card with 3 fans. It gets up to about 72 degrees Celsius under load, which is not that bad, but I wanted to see if I could get the temperatures down in the 60s by undervolting. I watched a few YouTube videos about undervolting the RTX 3080, but I was not having any luck. Their instructions were not the best, and a lot of them assumed that the viewers knew some of the steps that they weren't showing in the video, and I was having problems trying to undervolt. That was until I found Will Creative's video. Link in the show notes below. He's by far got the best video out there, step by step, for undervolting. Let's take a look at the process using Will's method. To properly undervolt your RTX 3080, you're going to need 3 programs. We've got Tech Power Up GPU Z. That's going to it gives you all the information about your graphics card. We're going to use the sensors tab so we can take a look at GPU clock speeds, GPU temperatures, fan speeds. You've got wattage. We're going to be looking at the board power draw, which is the overall wattage that it's going to pull when it's under load. The second program we've got is MSI Afterburner. This is how we're going to initiate the undervolting on the GPU card. And then the third program is Heaven Benchmark. That's what's going to stress our GPU and test out our different settings. Main thing is going to be happening here in MSI Afterburner. First thing you want to do is run the Heaven benchmark, and that's going to give us the standard that we're going to go by of what it's doing right now. My GPU, the megahertz was at 1770, volts was at 0.906, wattage was at 314, and the max temp was at 73 degrees Celsius. So once you get your baseline, we're going to open up MSI Afterburner. We're going to open up the curve editor, and you notice that the frequency is on the left and the voltage is on the bottom. And this is basically my setting on my card right now. This is the curve that it does when it goes under full load. So we want to offset the curve by 250, so put in a minus 250 within the core clock and hit enter. So that's going to reduce our curve by 250 megahertz. So you want to start around the middle. 950 is the recommended place to start. So you would just select, click and hold, and then we know my max was 1770 normally. So we go up to 1770, we hit that, and then you want to click this check mark over here to apply. And that's going to set our curve to where when the undervolting, when it gets up to 1770, then it's going to hold at 1770. So then you would run your Heaven benchmark and see where you're at. So you can see on the bottom that the millivolts goes down by 25 each time. So we're starting in the middle, and you're going to test. You're going to redo this. To reset, you just hit the reset over here, and then we're going to subtract our 250 minus 250, enter. Okay, and then we would move down to the next one, which is 925, and we bring it up to 1770. And you're going to do that repeatedly until your system becomes unstable. On my system, once I got down to a certain point, the Heaven benchmark crashed. Once it does that, then you know, okay, it's not gonna be stable on that one, and you're gonna have to move back up. Mine went down to 725, so I did like 12 tests. I started at 950, I made it all the way down to 725, and that's when Heaven benchmark crashed. So I went back up 2 because my 775 was one of my strongest runs, just about. Well, 750 was strong, but I went back up 2 just for safety's sake and ran the test again. And then, okay, it was stable. We were doing good at 1770. My card for the 3080 is rated at 1800, and it was stable on the 1770. So I was wondering, I wonder if I can push my card a little higher for the megahertz for performance. So at first I went up to 1800. I locked it in and I ran the test. And then it did fine on the test and everything was great. So then I thought, well, maybe I can push it a little more. Still on the 775 because that was my sweet spot for voltage. And I pushed it up past 1800. I think I went to 1850. Yeah, I went up 50. So I went to roughly 1850. I think I went 1854 on this chart. Locked it in and it crashed. It crashed right away when I did the heaven benchmark. So I knew that was pushing it a little too much. So through the various testing, like I said, I tested each one at the 1770 all the way down in the voltage till it crashed at 725. Then I went back up a couple, and then I continued testing, and then I was testing out the megahertz, the frequency. So once I was locked in and found the perfect spot for my card, it's different for each card. You know, you're going to get that GPU lottery. Some GPUs are going to be crappy, some are going to be even better. So my sweet spot was undervolting and then setting the megahertz at that 1800, and that gave me my overall my temperature decreased by 4 or 5 degrees Celsius. My wattage decreased by about 40 watts. My max boost increased on the megahertz by 60 megahertz because I was at 1770. And this and with this setting, even though it was set at 1800, it was maxing out at 1830 megahertz. So I got improved performance on that. My fan speeds were down. They went down about 500 RPM because it was running cooler, so the fans didn't have to run as much to keep it cool. My voltage, 775. That's where we ended up at. My score, my benchmark score increased by 267 points. So when I started out, my benchmark score was 6385 with an FPS of 253. And once I found the sweet spot, my score increased by 267 and it was at 6657. And the FPS at 264. So an increase in megahertz, increase in score, and increase in FPS while being undervolted. So it worked. Now once you do all your testing and find your sweet spot like I did, then you want to save it. So we'll click the save. And then select a number to save it at. I didn't have anything saved over here, so we'll save it at number 1. So now this curve in this setting is saved at number 1. However, if you don't do these other next settings, it's not going to save every time you reboot your computer. So go into your settings and you want to check start with Windows. And I also started minimize. There's no reason to open, have the program open every time. So we want to start it with Windows. We want to apply that. Click OK. And then you select the number here and then click this Windows icon up here. And that's going to lock it in to where that setting, that undervolt setting, is going to start every time my Windows boots up. So I don't have to worry about going into MSI every time and doing the settings before I start playing a game. they're set, it's going to run, and it's going to be set that way. So now that we have the CPU and the GPU running at optimum levels, at lower wattage, performance is better on the GPU, you now want to test it with your games. Because, some games might stress it different than the Heaven benchmark, and it could still crash under certain loads. The most unoptimized and demanding game I usually play is Warzone, so I thought that would be the perfect one to test with. And it did fine. It did fine with all the undervolted components. Ran normal as far as I could tell. I did have one weird thing happening while I was testing in Warzone. It like blacked out and had a black box that kind of moved. I honestly don't know if that was because of what I did to my GPU or if that was just Warzone glitch, because we all know Warzone is glitchy. And I've had issues with Warzone glitching, not a black screen, but a white screen before undervolting. So I can't really chalk it up if it was caused by me or if it's just another Warzone glitch. So in conclusion, are we saving money on our electrical bill? I would say yes. Now, is it going to be a phenomenal amount of money? No. We're only cutting, a little bit of wattage every time we're gaming, but, that's going to add up over time, especially the way the energy costs are continuing to rise. Some of the takeaways, I have improved performance with lower wattage used, lower temperatures. It's going to improve the lifespan of my equipment because it's running at lower temperatures. The fans don't have to run as high. The equipment is just running more efficient, and I can still do the things I like to do with it. So definitely a win-win as far as that goes. I will say this about undervolting: it's not a quick process. You might look at my video and I told you what my optimum settings were for the CPU and the GPU. You might apply that to yours and just go with that. Or it might not work on your system and you have to do, 25 increments on the GPU or, figure out exactly what your CPU. Not all CPUs and GPUs are created the same. So, it's a tedious process between all the Cinebench tests and all the Heaven benchmark tests. It takes a while. It took a few hours to go through all this stuff and put all this together for you. If you are interested in this, take your time. Don't jump to the bottom or jump to a setting that mine works on, because it might not work on yours. So, take your time, do the test, set the settings, do a test. If it works, fine. Lower it again, do another test. Don't just, and don't try to cheat the system and jump farther ahead. I would say undervolting is a lot safer than trying to overclock. I overclocked this 2080 Ti, and in the end, it's a brick now. It's not even usable. Somehow the thermal settings got deactivated on the BIOS on it, and it overheated, and the chip basically exploded. So it's a $1,200 brick, and you don't want to do that. So, if you're thinking of overclocking, definitely don't listen to me. But if you're undervolting, I thought it was a safe and very easy to understand process, and the benefits, speak for themselves. If you watched up to this point in the video, I commend you, because I bore myself sometimes when I watch these things back. I'm trying to improve the content. You can help me out with improving the content by leaving some comments below on this video. Say, hey, maybe do this or that. I'm open to suggestions to try to make this, a more pleasant viewing experience for you guys. But I'm just trying to get information out there. So thanks for joining. Stay safe, and we'll see you on the next one.